Can you hear me?
Yes, we can now. Sorry about that.
Oh,
Did you hear any of your glorious intro that I just gave you?
I didn't hear anything. Sorry.
It's all good. I was just sharing with everyone here and online that you're joining us from DC. You're with Lambda Legal. We're going to give you about 10 minutes to testify and then provide the committee opportunity to ask any questions they may have. Um, and if you don't mind, start maybe to share a little bit of your background and then you can transition into your testimony.
Great. It's just go now.
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much. Hello. Good morning, members of good morning, Chair Dolezal and members of the committee. My name is Sasha Bookert. I use she and her pronouns, and I'm an attorney with Lambda Legal, and I've been with Lambda Legal for about 7 years. Before that, I came from the Bay Area, where I worked at Transgender Law Center, and before that, I came from Oregon, where I worked at Basic Rights Oregon, and I'm a longtime Oregonian. I really appreciate the opportunity to provide testimony, especially through Zoom, and I really appreciate the due diligence that this committee is conducting to, really explore this issue. So I'm here to urge you to not recommend a categorical ban on participation among transgender girls in athletics. As with any public proposal policy, I think the first question always should be, what problem is this seeking to solve? And it just can't be that transgender girls are a threat to displaced women in sports. That's, it's statistically impossible. Trans kids make up less than 1.4% of the population entirely, and half of that is obviously 0.7%. And sadly, very few of that 0.7% of transgender girls participates in sports. So it's just not possible. And often, I'm sure that's not the case here, but I've heard from a lot of legislators who are supportive of categorical bans who are unable to identify a single transgender athlete in their state, much less a transgender girl in their state. And I guess I would just ask, we don't have to go through this now, but I would just ask you to, consider that question. And I really feel like it's part of responsible policy making to have met with the constituents that are going to be most directly impacted by whatever policy proposal comes out of this, and really urge you to meet with them and to hear their stories. And I think you'll be, pleasantly surprised. But I really feel like that's a must-have as part of this process. I want to quote Utah Governor Cox's veto memo in striking down, a similar proposal for a categorical ban, who, highlighted, as hopefully I'll get across today, that, these are great kids. They're kids who face enormous struggles. And he mentioned three numbers specifically: 75,000, 4, and 1. 75,000 kids playing sports in Utah. I'm sure that number is much higher in Georgia, but I think it's proportionally the same. Four trans kids playing sports, and one transgender girl playing sports. And and he went on to say that, four kids and only one of them playing girl sports. That's what this is all about. Four kids who aren't dominating or winning trophies or taking scholarships. Four kids who are just trying to find some friends and feel like they're a part of something. Four kids trying to get through their day. Rarely has so much fear and anger been directed at so few. And, I just want to, as an aside, I haven't had a chance to participate in this process, but, just, looking at the way that, these issues are discussed, I just want to note for the committee and urge you to be really careful about the way the rhetoric is targeting trans youth. There's a real, aside from whatever happens and whatever proposal comes out of this committee, there's an impact on the mental health of these kids when demonizing terms are used, or words that are, weaponized to really, marginalize and stigmatize them. That is going to have a lifelong effect. So I just would urge the committee to be really careful about how these conversations are framed. Another point is that, often these bans are premised on hypothetical and dire warnings about, the harm that's going to come, by having an inclusive policy to women's sports. But I think, again, as part of responsible public policy making, you need to look at empirical evidence. And yes, we'll talk about the science, but I think it's also really important to talk about, what's happened where these policies are in place across the country. And based on the numbers that the National Youth Risk Behavior Survey has shown, participation among high school girls has remained the same in states where there are inclusive policies. In fact, the numbers have dropped in the states where there are bans. And in some places, like California and Connecticut, numbers have increased among cisgender girls. And I think another impact in talking about cisgender girls is that, these bans and the way these things are talked about has led to heightened gender verification accusations. We hear stories all the time of, parents accusing kids playing sports of being transgender because they don't conform with gender stereotypes. Or often some of these bills, include, ways that students can prove their gender if they're accused of being transgender. So there's a side effect on that. I'd like to talk about one of the cases, that has been filed in response to a similar measure. And I raise this, yes, to make the point that I think it's far from a slam dunk that, this kind of the categorical ban policy is fireproofed against litigation, and that there are serious, liabilities that, advancing something like a categorical ban would have on, putting school districts in an impossible situation, given the case law around this issue. But I think the main point I'm trying to make in highlighting this case is just to humanize again. That's my main objective, in this testimony, is just to clarify that these are kids that you're talking about. And I'll start with I just wanted to talk about the BPJ case in West Virginia. The plaintiff in that case, and I know this has been talked about, in prior testimony, but I'll just give a little more background about it. This is the plaintiff in the case is an 8th grade girl who, I wish I could show you a picture. I think my colleague might have, but she's just a sweet kid, 8th grader who just wants to play on her team sports, her cross country team, and it was told that she couldn't because of West Virginia's ban on participation. And as the court noted, this is a girl who's been living publicly as a girl for more than, and this is very common. I mean, this is almost to a T, every trans girl that I know in secondary and primary education, living publicly and living as a girl for over 5 years. She's created gender support plans to affirm her gender identity, ensure she is recognized as a girl at school. To align with her gender identity, she's changed her name and her birth certificate, and is recognized, throughout her school as who she is. She's worked to create a gender support plan and to ensure that she's recognized as a girl at school. She takes puberty blocking medication to prevent her body from experiencing male adolescent development, and estrogen hormone therapy, which leads to develop outward physical characteristics. Her family, teachers, and classmates have all known her as a girl for several years. She's only participated in girls athletics teams. And, as the Fourth Circuit held, and the thing I'm trying to get across here is that there is a tremendous amount of harm in a categorical ban for kids like her, because the bans would force her to not be able to participate entirely. The idea that somehow she'll be able to just participate on a boys' team isn't a real choice, as the court noted. She's not going to reverse half of her life, and by introducing herself to teammates and coaches or opponents as a boy. And that language isn't exceptional. That's something we also saw in the injunction that was issued in Idaho, where the court said in that injunction that, look, this is akin to telling a gay person under a same-sex marriage ban that, they're not being denied the right to marry. They can marry somebody of the opposite sex. And that same language was echoed in the injunction that was issued in Utah as well, where the court there said, look, if they're not eligible to play on a girls' team, they have no meaningful opportunity to play at all. And I think we can all agree, that sports participation is so important to kids, especially of this age. It helps enhance their health and emotional and psychological well-being, and improves their educational prospects, and it expands their social networks. And it's so important for girls like the plaintiff in this case, who are already at a heightened stage of risk for feelings of isolation and discrimination and esteem. And it's so important to build, those peer relationships at that age. And just a few other thoughts in closing. I want to just clarify that the vast consensus of the case law here is really solid. It's not just this West Virginia case that led to a summary judgment. It's also the case that in Idaho there was an injunction that was issued that was appealed to the Ninth Circuit that was affirmed. And there's a case in Arizona where an injunction was issued against a categorical ban like this. In Utah, in state court just last month, or just in September, in New Hampshire, and in Montana, and in Tennessee, that case involved a transgender boy. I guess in closing, I just would urge the committee to avoid recommending a blanket ban on the participation of transgender girls. I'm not entirely clear how Georgia has handled this in the past, but it seems to me that a commission, that's pretty similar to what we've seen, a high school commission in other states, is the best situated to decide whether there are, safety or competitive concerns based on an individual sport and an individual athlete. But banning trans kids altogether from participating is cruel, and it'll deprive, many of them the lifelong opportunities that they're going to be robbed, and that are going to have, long-term negative impacts on their health and their well-being overall. And I would just encourage the legislature and this committee in particular to take a more measured and humane approach to this issue rather than bowing to the extreme. Thank you. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Anyone on the committee have any questions? Chairman Dixon, you on 7, 5?
Good morning. Thank you for testifying here today. One question I did have, you're talking about a trans girl in another state. Something about, was she able to change her birth certificate from male to female? Was that, or did I hear you wrong? I may have heard you wrong.
No, that's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Sasha, I have a couple questions. I'm wondering if we can just maybe go down a path conversationally here for a second.
Sure.
So I understand that your position is you are opposed to what you would call a categorical ban. Let's just define what you mean when you say categorical ban, if you don't mind.
Sure. A ban that would prohibit any transgender kid from participating in sports consistent with their gender identity.
Okay. What policy positions do you support as it relates to this topic?
Well, I just would, at this point, I'm just going to say that we would oppose a categorical ban.
Okay, I understand that, but what would you what would you like to see this committee or other states do as it relates to this topic?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a common sense solution here that's been in place, in a lot of other places where, there would be a committee that could look at, individual athletes and decide on a case-by-case basis. I'm not saying that we would support any final decision that's made by that committee, but, because, there's a lot of considerations that need to be made, but, we just wouldn't support a categorical ban at this point.
What are the considerations that you think should be looked at?
Yeah, I think, the questions would be what the science says about the individual athlete, what sport you're talking about, what age level.
Can you get into some specifics around the scientific markers that you think would be worth looking at? We've heard of, obviously, testosterone testing has been talked about in this committee before. Deferral to governing bodies has been talked about.
Yeah, I think that my understanding, I'm not a scientist, but my understanding is that the medical consensus is that, the primary driver of the differences in athletic performance is based on circulating testosterone.
Okay. So you would be in support of a ban that had some sort of testosterone threshold, whether that was the 10 nanomoles or that has been mentioned before, or something along those lines?
No, I didn't say that. I said that, it should be decided on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, so you would envision let's just take an example of a swimmer, and you would be in support of a threshold of testosterone for a swimmer that would be different from one person to the next?
No, I'm just saying, no, I would just be in support of an individualized assessment, of each athlete based on, the sport involved and, the grade level and, yeah, I would just say, just to make it easy, I would just say that it should be based on an individualized basis. I don't want to stake out a position, that says that this athlete would, qualify under this standard or that standard. I think it just needs to be a decision needs to be made on an individualized basis.
Would you at least agree, though, that could be uniform across competitive categories? And by that, I mean high school versus college, and sport specific. In other words, that within women's swimming, which was the first testimony that we heard, would you be supportive of a threshold that was universal for all trans athletes?
I would have to actually look at the threshold that was decided upon before deciding on that, before accepting.
Well, I'm just asking about a threshold.
Yeah,
whatever the threshold was, do you believe that there could be a universal threshold?
Yeah, I would have to see what that threshold is. I think it would just need to be, again, a case-by-case basis, because, when you start making absolute, when you start taking absolute positions like that, that erases, to me, the individual sport that's involved and, the grade that's involved, and there's a whole lot of other.
Well, I just gave you a scenario that was specific to grade and specific to sport, and I'm asking you if, I think your answer is no, just to be clear.
Yeah.
That you believe, let's just take collegiate swimming. You believe that for collegiate swimming, there's not a testosterone level that we could arrive at that would be fair, or let's just call it fair, for lack of a better term, that would be the determining factor of participation in women's swimming.
Yeah, I didn't say that. I said that we would need to sit down and explore what that is before me taking a position on that.
Okay. You referenced, and I would agree with this, that the science says that the testosterone is really the driving factor, right? That's even though we see, and we've heard testimony that among youth athletes, we see some differences. Those differences are exacerbated through puberty. The heart size, the hemoglobin levels, the bone density, all of the things that we would say are the determining or the immutable differences between males and females, that those are primarily derived through puberty. Would you agree with that statement?
I'm not a scientist, so I'm not qualified to make that kind of assessment. I
But
will
you
say that
previously said that the science agreed with that.
I'm not in a position to comment on that.
I thought you already commented on it.
Sorry, I don't understand your question.
I was trying to go down my question ultimately was going to get to this participation question again, but I was trying to do so through what I thought would be a rubric that you and I would agree on, which was your previous statement that the science is conclusive that testosterone is the driving factor for the differences that emerge, but in terms of speaking broadly, the ability for males to outperform females almost universally in sport at the elite levels.
That's correct.
Okay. So given that, would you agree then that there is an inherent difference in the ability of a male who has gone through puberty versus a female who has gone through puberty, and that primarily is the reason for the existence of women's sports?
No, I wouldn't agree with that. Again.
Which part wouldn't you agree with?
Sorry, could you not interrupt me? I wouldn't agree, with that as a generalization that's true. I think my understanding of the science is that, once a transgender woman is able to, suppress her testosterone, that she falls in the same level of athletic competition or competitiveness as a cisgender woman.
So it's your testimony today that a male who has gone through puberty at the age of, let's just take Leah Thomas as an example, because that's the case that was talked about exclusively here, that the hemoglobin level differences, the bone density differences, the bone structure differences, those are changed through hormone therapy?
Yeah. My testimony today is that, there is no empirical evidence, no scientific evidence comparing transgender women and cisgender women that shows that after being able to suppress testosterone and undergo estrogen therapy, that there is an elite competitive advantage. No.
Okay. Any other questions from Senator Dixon?
What's your opinion on a trans girl or what you've seen in other states without a ban as far as changing rooms, dealing with sports? Have they had separate changing rooms, or are they allowed to change in there with the female athletes as well?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Again, this echoes, the point I was making earlier about, the importance of looking at empirical evidence in policymaking. And, the fact is that, again, there have been inclusive policies around the country, where kids have been able to participate, without, quote, destroying women's sports, and in addition, kids, yes, have been able to, use, restrooms and locker rooms consistent with their gender identity without incident. And, there has been, extensive testimony that's provided from law enforcement agencies and from domestic violence shelters, et cetera, showing that there is no danger or harm or invasion of privacy that's been associated with the ability to use restrooms and locker rooms. And I also think it's really important to remember that telling a kid that they can participate with their girls team, but they have to use a separate facility is stamping them with a badge of inferiority and separating them out from their peers, which is extremely harmful.
Yeah, I just personally have a concern, having two daughters, having a trans female that still has male genitalia changing in her restroom, being a minor child. I just see a big issue with that. I was hoping there would be some type of separation there. And then wanted to go back to the birth certificate. With the change there, and you may not know the details, but what changes did that male transitioning to a female, what all did they go through to be able to get their birth certificate changed from male to female?
I'd have to go back and look at the details with regard to the state policy regarding how folks go about amending their identity documents, in that state. But so I don't know. I can't answer that question. But going back to your point about locker rooms, and I think it sounds like we might be of around the same age, but I think it's important to know that locker rooms and restrooms have changed dramatically since the 1980s, and there is a lot more privacy these days than there was 20-30 years ago in high schools and grade schools.
Yeah, I disagree with that. We had testimony. This was actually a Georgia Tech, swim meet that many of us know about. But we had testimony from, I believe it was 4 females there that were forced to change in front of a transgender woman that was still endowed with male genitalia, and how horrific it was for them. And that was college-age students. So, yeah, I disagree with you on that. But thank you for your comment.
Yeah, and there's lots of testimony going the opposite way as well. Thank you.
What number are you on there, Senator Ramon?
9.
All right, recognize Senator Ramon.
Thank you.
Ramon.
I just have a quick question. Can you tell us how many states right now, currently has a law to totally ban transgender to participate in sports? How many states enacted the law or passed the law? Do you have any
there's about 25 states have passed laws, seeking to categorically ban kids from playing.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from the committee? One more from Chairman Dixon.
Going back to the birth certificate, what state was that in by chance?
West Virginia.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I see no other questions from the committee. Sasha, just want to thank you for joining us today. Sorry for the technical difficulties at the start, but certainly appreciate you participating. And should you have anything further you'd like to add to your testimony, you're more than welcome to reach out to the committee via email.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, we're going to move on to public testimony. And we're going to start here. And I will ask those that are going to testify to step up to the podium. Would ask that we keep our comments to around 3 minutes. I'm not going to run a timer. The committee will have an opportunity to ask questions if they wish to anyone that testifies. We're going to start with Brooke Mells, and then Tony Michelle Williams, you'll be on deck. So is Brooke here? Okay, we'll come back. Tori, is Tori here? Oh, I'm sorry. I had it right the first time, then I misread it the second time. My apologies. Lisa Blankenship, you'll be up after Tony.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
My name is Tony Michelle Williams, and I am the Executive Director of the Solutions Not Punishment Collaborative. Many people in the community know us as SNAPCO, or the Snap for Freedom movement. We are an Atlanta-based, transgender-led organization dedicated to building safety within our communities through embodied leadership and building, of course, political power. At SNAPCO, we are here and working to address the root causes of violence for and on trans people and trans communities, which works to limit Black and trans people's interactions with law enforcement, and even creating and curating moments and events like our passport clinic that we had yesterday at Atlanta City Hall. Although we are trans-led, it's important to note that we are fighting for everyone in the city and in the state for Georgia. And when I say fighting, I mean we are at the forefront of our movement, speaking up and sitting in deep waters with the people who are most impacted by policies that do not serve our communities. Currently, we are witnessing attacks and policy proposals that are based on misinformation, not fact-based evidence about gender-affirming care for our trans and non-binary youth. Some children may have advantages when it comes to sports. That's literally the basis for many of our most respected athletes. Different physiques and body makeups are going to have advantages whether trans or not. But I'm afraid that folks in the Capitol and across the nation are using the self-determination of our youth and our people to express themselves and live as they truly are to gain political brownie points. Attempting to create these blanket bans is nonsensical because schools and athletic departments already have protections set in place to allow for even playing fields. Creating policy for an issue that doesn't exist is harmful to our communities. Georgia is a microcosm for the United States and the world around us. Every day, the trans community faces harm simply for existing. But we know what our future is made of. Our future is filled with safety and dignity for trans people, and it is one built on our collective resistance and power. We are here, we exist, and our existence will not be sidelined or hidden. Going deeper than visibility, it's important to understand that although trans folks are visible, we face an increased amount of violence being visible. As a trans woman myself and a leader in our community, I fear every day. I fear every day for my life. Whether it's simple interactions at grocery stores or nightlife and parties, or even walking into this building, as I have a stance against anti-police violence and other things, again, that I know simply harms my community. Although you may believe it or not, trans and queer people and other marginalized groups and folks of color do not trust the police. Our work at SNAPCO is rooted in finding out and researching, being in the community around the things that harm us and the things that we care about. Over 86% of folks in our recent survey, Deeper Than Visibility, said and acknowledged that they do not feel safe around police. They do not trust larger institutions that don't make space for our stories and make space for our truth. And today and every day, we ask that you do that work with us, that you do what's necessary for you to be able to see us in our wholeness, to be present with us in our fullness, and to fight for us when the time comes. The time to fight for us is now. You have the ability and the power to make different decisions, to hold this space, even today and this morning, differently for trans people, including myself, who are here advocating for our youth and advocating for our right to continue to live and breathe. Yesterday was Trans Day of Remembrance. Over the last 2 years, over 4 trans people have been murdered. And we did a beautiful display in City Hall of over 20 people whose lives have been lost in Atlanta and around Georgia since 2015, whether it was around succumbing to state violence or murders from interpersonal violence and family, or just simply gone too soon. We are saying that our folks are dying at the hands and the voices of harmful rhetoric. And again, people who don't make the space for the truth of our existence. I'm here in the flesh to remind you that, and I'm standing on the forefronts, and I'm on the shoulders of many trans people, some in this room who are doing the same work of fighting for justice, fighting for our dignity, and fighting for respect for all of us. But most importantly, making space for us to live and for us to breathe each day, just like you and your family. I'm here to remind you that I'm a daughter. I am a favorite cousin, AKA Pee-wee, to many of my babies. I'm a granddaughter and so many other things to my family and community. Although I may have a leadership and lead an organization, I'm still in the trenches with my folks. And we thank you for the opportunity to speak. And again, we charge you with fighting for us when the time is right. And again, that time is right now. Happy Trans Day of Remembrance to folks who are holding loss and grief. And I hope that you make space to learn more about those stories and about the people, trans people in Georgia who've lost their lives to senseless violence. Thank you.
Thank you. Hang tight just 1 second. Any questions from the committee? Okay, thank you. Did Brooke make it back in? No, Brooke. All right, Lisa Blankenship. Are you Brooke? Okay, perfect.
Okay, sorry about that.
And then Lisa Blankenship will be up next.
All right, bear with me. I have a speech impediment. Now, I am absolutely overjoyed that y'all are hearing us out today because over the past 2 committee meetings, it's felt a little hostile, the temperature in here. So I'm glad y'all are willing to take it down a bit and meet us in the middle. Now, last time when y'all had the ADF reps in here, I heard some very interesting testimony talking about how trans people are somehow this mighty monolith of utter cardiovascular strength, of utterly high bone density. Now, I come from a unique position of having medically transitioned for over a decade now, and I can tell you now, when I first started this off, I definitely would have looked male to any of y'all. I didn't have a beard as awesome as Senator Jason over there, but I certainly tried. Now, I can tell you now that I've lost height in my 10 years of transition. No surgeries. This is all hormonal. This is all hormone replacement. My testosterone levels are at my cisgender peers level. I have lost a commensuratively large amount of muscle and bone mass. My bone density has dropped astronomically, and as an asthmatic, it is quite noticeable. So, being able to match the fastest competitive athletic runner in the women's division is a bit higher than I can meet. I can't even beat my mom at thumb wars, to be quite frank. But I can certainly try. Now, I do want to address some of the suggestions being thrown around here for recommendations. Now, I do recognize that you, Mr. Chairman, mentioned deferring to athletic associations and their recommendations, and I think that's a good step here because, frankly, the Georgia state government has seldom interfered in the competitive athletic field before, and I don't see a reason to start now. I'm more than confident that the athletic competition and divisions here in Georgia are more than capable of regulating themselves. Because frankly, here we do. I believe y'all do the good work, and let's try to focus on that, helping people with their kitchen table issues. And also potentially getting the roads I'm out back fixed, because let me tell you, it was hell getting over here. Now a couple of sessions ago, the gentleman from the 45th mentioned a scenario about transgender people in bathrooms, trans women in bathrooms. I believe your comments in March were something along the lines of a trans woman being obvious in the bathroom and immediately everyone else in the bathroom fleeing. Now, I just came from the restroom a few minutes ago, and despite my chronic IBS, no one came running. So I think I can say with confidence here that that scenario is not played out. Now, I have been labeled by labeled people like me perverse and gross in the past, and you know what? I might not be the prettiest looker, but I'll roll with what I can here. Now, let's just address the material of this committee here. Now, y'all first started out at sports, but now y'all are talking about legal recognition in bathrooms, and and I want to believe this is entirely in good faith, but we've seen where this escalates. In Florida, for instance, in 2022, they started on competitive sports in K through 12. And a short while ago, they banned gender affirming healthcare for adults. If I were to move to Florida right now, my hormones would be cut off. And as someone who is post-surgical, that would put me through menopause. Now I don't have to put you through the thrilling tales of menopause, but I think y'all can believe me when I say that is not a thrilling proposition. In Florida, there is a felony bathroom ban in place. So if I were spotted in a bathroom, male or female, I could potentially be incarcerated for that. And in Texas right now, they're actually throwing around a bounty hunter bill on bathrooms and trans people, regardless of the bathroom used, anything but single single user bathrooms. Now, I think we can recognize that that this is not a good stepping stone to start on, because while I do agree there, I think we can all agree here that girls and women in Georgia need protection. If y'all keep track with the Georgia Recorder rate publication, earlier this year, they mentioned that multiple allegations of sexual harassment and abuse at the hands of male coaches overseeing these girls' teams, and frankly, that is awful. And I think we can do better by our female and our girls and our women athletes here. And if we really want a good recommendation to work off of, we have a real pay disparity here in the state of Georgia. Now I know, Mr. Chairman, you have been in close contact with Georgia Tech and their competitive division. So if you'd like, you can check out with them and even ask them about the pay disparity for their athletes between male and female competitive athletes. They can tell you themselves that the pay disparity is real, and these are real issues hurting women and female athletes. And let's just back away from trans people here for a moment. How does this affect cis
I'm gonna ask you
people?
to go ahead and wrap it up as we're at 7
All
minutes
right,
right
now,
now. Thank
just
you.
about there. Now, in other states where some of these recommendations that have been thrown around in this room have been implemented, such as bathroom and categorical sports bans, like the person before me mentioned, we are an astronomically small portion of the population. I'm 1 in 100, and more often than not, this targets cisgender or natal women who just don't conform well enough to feminine stereotypes. In Minnesota, a cisgender woman was assaulted for being mistaken as a trans woman in a bathroom. I've seen regularly on TikTok and other platforms videos of cisgender or natal women, non-trans women, being assaulted for not being feminine enough and being read as transgender. So these have a real material cost, not just to trans people, but to cis people as well. So I'd like y'all to take that into consideration for your recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Brooke, next up is Lisa Blankenship. And then Reverend Sorrells, you will be on deck. I'm sorry, I didn't ask. Did anyone have any questions? Okay. Let's just do it this way. If y'all do have questions, just signal to me or press your button there and I'll see it light up. All right, floor is yours. Thank you.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Lisa Blankenship, and I live in Woodstock up in Cherokee County, and I'm a parent of a college swimmer. My daughter, Katie, has been a competitive swimmer since she was 5. She fell in love with the sport right away. She swam year-round on a club team up through high school, as well as on the River Ridge High School swim team. Swimming competitively has taught her many life skills like time management, mental toughness, and how to win and lose gracefully and setting goals. She's also made a lot of special friendships along the way. As a family, we supported her by driving her to early morning practices, attending and volunteering at swim meets, and celebrating her accomplishments. She decided to continue swimming in college at Roanoke College in Salem, Virginia, which is a D3 school. She started her freshman year in 2022 and had a great first-year experience both academically and athletically, but little did we know that her swim experience was about to change. Just prior to the start of the 2023 season, the girls were made aware that a male swimmer who swam on the men's team in 2021 season didn't swim in 2022 as he decided to socially transition, decided he wanted to swim on the girls' team. Most of the girls were not okay with this, but voicing their concerns fell on deaf ears. Several of us parents even wrote to the school president and the athletic director to voice our concerns, but none of us received any response. I even called the athletic director, left a message, but instead he had the swim coach call me back. Every phone call with Katie revolved around the situation where she shared her frustration that despite numerous meetings with the coach and the athletic director, nothing was done to address this. Katie and her female teammates were subjected to practicing almost daily with this boy in a woman's swimsuit. And needless to say, a women's swimsuit is not designed to accommodate male genitalia. To make matters worse, the boy was a substantially faster swimmer than the girls. Keep in mind, this was a D3 school. When he swam on the men's team, he swam average men's D3 times. His times would be D1 women's times, which meant if he competed on the women's team, he would smash any school records in the events he swam. Also, if he swam in the NCAA conference meet, 4 women would have been removed from relays and 3 would have been removed from individual events. There was only 16 on the girls' squad. This was discouraging to my daughter and her teammates, and I became very concerned about her mental health as she continued to share her frustrations with the women not being heard. The women were then given the opportunity to have what they thought would be an anonymous vote on the boy joining the women's team. At the beginning of the meeting, the coach showed up with the boy. The boy said he wanted to join the girls' team and basically said if he was not allowed to join the team and something happened to him, it would be on the girls. Most of the girls felt coerced into voting for the boy joining the team. Needless to say, my daughter was extremely upset about the whole situation. Roanoke College did not have a policy on transgender athletes, and they hid behind the NCAA policy, which does not protect women either. Since the girls and some of the parents were out of options, 10 of the women banded together, including my daughter, and with the help of Riley Gaines, went public with their story. On October 5th, 2023, they held a press conference where they stood up together and each one shared their story. These women risked backlash from various sources, but in the end, they stood up for themselves and for every female athlete. They were the first women's team to stand up and say it's not okay for men to be in women's sports. The boy left the team, but the emotional trauma had already been done to the women. On Saturday, November 2nd, 2024, President Trump held a rally in Salem, Virginia. He's a supporter of keeping men out of women's sports and invited the girls to share their story on stage. Since then, the girls have been harassed both on campus and in social media. The swim team is fractured, and the school is siding with the LGBTQ community instead of protecting our girls from this harassment. This isn't a transgender issue, but purely a fairness in women's sports issue. Allowing a male to compete on women's team completely devalues women and takes away their confidence and opportunities. We need to do more to protect women's sports and maintain fair competition. This whole experience has taught both my daughter and me that we need to stand up and speak out. It is sad that our society has lost its way in common sense and that we need to pursue legislation to protect women's sports. I hope that this testimony will encourage other parents to stand up for our girls. Thank you.
Lisa. Thank you, Lisa. I don't see any questions from the committee. Next up is Reverend Sorrells, and then after that, Tom Rawlings. Thank you, Reverend. Floor
Thank
is
you.
yours.
My name is Reverend Kimball Sorrells. I'm an ordained minister in the United Church of Christ. I am here today as a pastor, as a parent, and as a former collegiate athlete myself to express my concern about these hearings and these efforts. I want to say that as a pastor, it is my sacred calling to stand up for the rights and well-being of all people, including those who are marginalized, perhaps especially those who are marginalized. To this end, I find these hearings to be a disturbing attack on transgender athletes, transgender people, and their well-being. As a former athlete myself, I played up at Berry College. I know how beneficial sports can be for a person's social development and overall well-being. When I look back at my time as a student athlete, what I valued the most is not any of the championships that we won or even the scholarship to college that I received, but rather the friendships I made and the sense of community and belonging that I found in team sports. To deny these benefits to transgender students is unfair. And it's not just unfair to them, actually. It's unfair to their teammates who might actually miss out from that shared participation from this other person. The benefits of sports are really especially important for transgender youth right now who have, as we know, increased levels of isolation, increased risk for suicide. And I just want to name and echo what has already been said, that these types of hearings are extremely harmful for the trans community and for trans youth especially. Regardless of what comes out of these hearings in terms of legislative efforts, there has been a communal trauma from the rhetoric, which is extremely harmful. The language that was just used in the previous testimony was extremely harmful. Some language that I've heard from others has been extremely harmful. That kind of trauma will cause harm to trans youth, regardless of the outcome of these hearings. These hearings are not morally neutral, okay? People will be harmed. There are threats and dangers to women's sports, but transgender people are not those threats. I want to lift up an example. When I was in high school, the women's varsity soccer team was going to be competing in a state championship and needed to practice and was moved off of the field so that the boys football team could have off-season spring training. Okay? Those are the kinds of things that are a threat to women's sports. If we want to promote women's sports, which we should, then we need to do things like focusing on increasing funding and access and ensuring that they have the same opportunities as the boys' teams. I also want to say that the NCAA and the NAIA exist for a reason. There has always been regulation in sports. They are the experts on the individual sports involved and should be making these rules with medical advisory and other people. This is a legislative overstep, frankly. Finally, I want to say that I have a daughter. She is only 5. So I don't know if she will be interested in sports or not. However, if she does decide to play sports, what I care about most of all in her development is not whether or not she wins any championships, or frankly, even if she gets scholarships to college, but that she has a chance to learn and find belonging. I hope that she learns what's more important than winning or even getting a scholarship is to welcome and celebrate identities of others who might be different from her, and to stand up for others who are marginalized and bullied. So I think it's time that we name these efforts for what they are, which is an attempt to discriminate. In the same way that it was never about water fountains, this is not about helping women's sports. So I urge you to do the compassionate thing and to be on the right side of history and protecting the rights of all students, athletes, and all people. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend. I had a question, if that's okay. You referenced the NCAA, the NAIA.
Mhm.
I don't think you referenced the IOC, but I think they would fall in the same category as
Sure.
being the appropriate places for these conversations to
Yes.
take place. Why do you believe these conversations need to happen at all? And what makes that a more appropriate venue versus the state legislature, which is the funding mechanism for both K through 12 public schools and at least the state university system?
Well, the reality is that it's already happening at those levels. Not just about gender, but about lots of things. There are lots of things that are regulated within elite sports. Just to give you an example, I took medication for ADHD for a couple of semesters in college, just kind of needed a little help focusing. There are certain medications that I could take, and there are certain medications that I could not take. Not a big deal. No one said I couldn't just play because of this particular condition. It was just something that was simply regulated based on medical evidence. So again, it's a conversation that is already happening, and I don't believe that it is the state's place to be involved.
Is there something in your mind that makes those conversations inherently okay, but makes these conversations discriminatory and harmful, and the other labels that you put on conversations like these that we're having?
That's not to say that there isn't discriminatory things that happen at those conversations. There are. But I think that this conversation is going to take place, and that is the appropriate place for it to happen, not here. That said, if I were in those conversations and language was being used about trans people that was harmful, I would still say that that is inappropriate.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm more so getting to, you would agree that somebody somewhere has to make a decision in terms of policy, right?
Sure.
And that the reason the policy is a policy that anyone's wanting to discuss is not because people are just randomly saying, you know what, we're just going to go pick on people for the sake of picking on people, but that we do have instances, and we would say that as the Lambda person referenced earlier, that there are immutable differences between the sexes of male and female. And would you agree with that?
Which
That's what I'm
part?
sure-
Because what you said was a couple
You
of
can
things.
pick whichever one you would disagree with, if any.
I think that, no, I would not agree with the point about immutable differences. There are a lot of differences that happen, and a lot of variation that happens naturally in biology that's not just about trans or these kinds of things. Lots of variation happens. So I would not say that that is so black and white. And I would remind all of us that I would say I am not a medical professional. I am a clergy person. So I will model staying in my lane on this one and say that I think that, again, that's not my area of expertise. What I am saying is that the rights and well-being of all people is important.
I would agree with that statement. But you're here testifying and placing a label on these hearings that I think is worth unpacking. And if you're going to take that position, I think it's fair for us to have a conversation on those grounds.
Sure.
At the elite levels,
Mhm.
it is undeniable that men throw farther, swim faster, run faster, jump higher, that in every measurable characteristic, that when it comes to sport, that in the male category, the males outperform the females, which I would argue is the reason that we have the existence of a female category, to create a separate but fair playing field on which females can participate on. So I'm struggling to understand how having this conversation in the halls of the NCAA is somehow fair, but having these conversations in the halls of a state legislature are discriminatory. Help me understand that.
So I'm saying that they're discriminatory in the language that's being used is harmful. I also think that this is not the appropriate place for that conversation because we are not athletic bodies. We don't necessarily know the sports involved, nor are, I don't know for sure, but I'm assuming none of you are all medical professionals either. So I'm saying that this is a government overreach. But the discriminatory nature is in how it's being discussed.
So the current posture in the state of Georgia, we're silent on collegiate sports, but we have essentially handed this off to an agency that has passed a categorical ban. What's your position on that? Because essentially we have done, I think, what you're asking us to do, and that body, the Georgia High School Association, has arrived at a position, and I don't know the extent of hearings that they've had. They may have brought in doctors like we have done. They may have had public testimony like we've done. I genuinely do not know the answer to that. So should this committee do nothing, that's currently the posture in the state of Georgia. And we essentially have followed what I'm saying is your position, but arrived at a position I think that you would vehemently oppose. Is that accurate?
If I'm understanding you correct, I would oppose this committee doing something about this issue. Yes, I would. If the bans that you're referencing are happening by those particular athletic boards, I would oppose those in those cases as well. However, I do think that that is the appropriate body to be having those conversations.
Okay, I appreciate that. Any other questions for the committee? Thank you for indulging me, Reverend. Thanks for being here today. Next up is Tom Rawlings, and then after Tom is Delphina. I hope I didn't mispronounce it. Booth.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Tom Rawlings. I'm an attorney. I've been working in this field for quite a long time. My usual job is child welfare. I've done child welfare consulting across the United States and other nations as well. I think what we're dealing with here today is that the ground has shifted and we're having to respond to the shifting ground. The truth is, if you go back to the 1970s and Title IX, the law was created because we recognized that women were not getting the same opportunities to advance in athletics as men. So we put in a sex-based right. And that, of course, is the right to have your women's teams. In 1979, the UN adopted, and the United States is a party to this treaty, the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination of all forms of discrimination against women. That particular convention really specifically deals with a sex-based right. And so the issue here is that over the last few years, we've gone from having a sex-based right, that is the right of women to their own spaces, the right of women to their own teams, the right of women to their own level playing field, and we have injected into it the concept of gender identity. Reem Al-Salem, who is the UN rapporteur on violence against women, has recently done a really comprehensive report on this issue. And she has found that across the Olympics, across, college, et cetera, across all sorts of sports, that biological men have essentially robbed women of at least 900 medals in various sports because these men, as you have already indicated, are so much stronger. Male children have testosterone flowing through their veins even before puberty. Once puberty hits, we know that there are significant differences. We know those differences are baked in: bone structure, lung capacity, heart capacity. And so once you have a male, biologically male child, a girl or a woman will not have the fair opportunity to compete against him. So we're really talking about, we're not dismissing the rights of trans people. They should have the right to present as they want, to live as they want, to participate in society. But what we're doing here is, because the ground has shifted under us, because the Biden administration tried to change the rules for Title IX, which the courts have consistently shot down, we are in a situation where we really need to say, what are the rights that women have to their own spaces, and make sure that our law is clear that those are sex-based rights. So that, we talked a little bit earlier, the Lambda legal attorneys talked about making people inferior. I'm very concerned that what is happening here in the effort to inject gender identity rights into sport is that we are actually making women inferior to trans women. And that can't happen. We have got to protect our girls. We've got to protect our women. We've got to protect their ability to participate fairly in sports and of course and have their own private spaces. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Tom. All right, guys, we're not going to handle outbursts. If you have signed up for public comment, you can obviously respond to any of the speakers during that time. Any questions from the committee? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next up, Delphina Booth, and then I believe it's Amanda Rivers will be on deck. Thank you for being here. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, and thank you for having me. My name is Delphina Booth, and I'm here to express my concern about the role of government in deciding who can and cannot participate in sports. As someone who ran women's track all throughout high school, I know firsthand and deeply value the lessons and opportunities that sports provide. Ooh, but I don't know how to use my own phone. Okay. I also understand the importance of fairness in competition. However, I believe it is not the government's place to impose sweeping one-size-fits-all bans that disrupt these values. To begin, sports are already managed by expert organizations like the NCAA, the International Olympics Committee, and professional leagues. These governing bodies have developed policies over decades that analyze fairness based on the unique needs of each sport. Contact sports have different rules than non-contact sports. Children's sports focus more on teamwork and development than adult sports, etc. These nuances cannot be addressed through broad government legislation. Additionally, decisions about athletic ability involve multiple complex factors, including the science of physical development and the specific demands of each sport. These aren't matters that lend themselves directly or easily to blanket rules. Governing bodies already consult experts to develop policies that reflect the realities of their respective sports. Government intervention risks oversimplifying these issues and creating rules that might not be fair or effective. I also believe that if we really care about women's sports, we need to focus on real solutions that I, as a young athlete, would have loved to see. More funding for girls' teams, better access to training, and equal media coverage would do more to strengthen women's sports than excluding a very small group of athletes through divisive policies. This is a highly nuanced issue best handled by the organizations with the necessary expertise and experience to navigate it. Our goal should be to build bridges and strengthen opportunities in sports, not to create more unnecessary divisions. Before I close, I'd like to share something personal that underscores why this conversation matters to me. During my time in college at Georgia Tech, I lost a transgender acquaintance to campus police violence. You might have heard about this event on the news, but for me and my friends, it was a personal and devastating event. Not long after, I also lost 2 close transgender friends to suicide. Both had been struggling under the weight of the hateful rhetoric and societal rejection they and the rest of the LGBT community have been facing every day. These were brilliant, compassionate people who deserved much more than what they got. What I've learned from these experiences is that quote-unquote political debates like these don't exist in a vacuum. They also don't just impact transgender individuals. They affect everyone who loves them. As a cisgender woman, I was not untouched by this communal pain, and I don't believe anyone is immune if we allow hatred to fester. This is why I urge this community to think carefully about the message you send, not just to transgender athletes, but to every person watching this debate unfold. Sports should be about inclusion, resilience, and unity. Let's ensure that the policies we champion reflect these values and bring us closer together. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? See any? Next up is what I believe is Manda Rivers. Apologies if I don't have that correct. And then on deck will be Aaron Baker.
Hi, y'all.
Hi.
I'm Amanda. This is the first time I've ever spoken at any public comment in a government setting like this. And I'm here because I'm alarmed. You know, sitting here, there was this thing on the screen. It said Senate Special Committee on Protecting Women's Sports or something like that. And the title alone freaks me out. I feel like I'm in George Orwell's 1984. We have such bigger problems in this country than this problem y'all are creating. We're living in a time when we can't trust the media. We can barely trust each other. We're living in a time when we have a lot of school shootings, when we're about to, as a country, face mass deportations that will be tearing apart our communities and families. And, you know, President-elect Donald Trump's talking about getting the military involved with that, getting the military involved in deporting people. You know, a lot of military people have family members that might be here as immigrants, illegally or otherwise. And politicizing the military is not the way. So these are big things that I'm worried about. And, you know, as a woman in 2024, I have less rights than my granny did in 1973. Women's rights are being taken away. And I feel like this is a similar issue. Like if one person's rights are being taken away, I'm going to stand up and say that I don't agree with it. And I think that y'all are contributing to vilifying trans women, to making them a scapegoat for a country that's very frustrated with the fact that we're having a hard time communicating. We're having a hard time getting on the same page. And y'all are... I hope you realize you're contributing to violence against women with even having this hearing, even holding such a thing. There's much more important things that I want to talk about. I need you as my government to spend your time more wisely, finding solutions that matter and not focusing on this very small community of people that are just trying to exist and live their lives. And, you know, as a woman, and I've done Taekwondo, I've done a couple of sports, but I don't feel threatened by trans people. I think trans women are women. I'm going to take somebody that joins my team and take them at face value. They're a woman. I think y'all, you know, people are uncomfortable, especially we saw President-elect Trump spend millions of dollars on these ads that are targeting trans people and trying to vilify and scapegoat them. And I'm not cool with that. I'm afraid of these people that are afraid of trans people. I think you're uncomfortable with this idea of a trans person. The fact is you're uncomfortable and you're scared because you don't understand. And if you feel uncomfortable, lean into that discomfort. Ask questions, you know, and because when we are uncomfortable, there's room for growth. educate yourself. Just know that your education will be uncomfortable. When we talk about our ideas and we try to look at them with a magnifying glass, you need to be aware of your inherent biases and like your specific situation. You know, like me as a white woman, I'm aware of my privilege in this country, and it kind of colors my life. I can't, like, that's who I am. And I have to be aware of every space I go to. I have to be aware of like, what is my place in the role of society? And today I'm looking at how can I use my voice to help people that are marginalized. I just also want to call out, I talked about 1984. We're heading towards a really scary place in this country, towards fascism, authoritarianism, and I'm freaked out. This hearing alone just ticks off a couple of red flags for me. I want to talk to y'all about the early warning signs of fascism. You can find this at Holocaust museums when you go. And here's just a couple that I find are present in this meeting. Number one is disdain for human rights. Y'all are talking about trans people like they're other. The woman that was talking earlier, I'm hearing like a lot of, you know, the woman I would think would support women. But for me, trans women are women. But what she was saying sounded really turfy, and that's like trans exclusive radical feminism. I don't agree with that. I think it's a disdain for human rights and not looking at the person she wanted to talk about. And I'm sorry for her daughter and the experience. And I'm really sorry for her because she's going to think this was her victimization and like something that bad that happened to her, when really the young trans woman that was trying to join their team, what about them? What about how they feel and the persecution they feel and being denied entrance into a group? When people don't even know them, they're just making these judgments about them. I also want to point out back to the early warning signs of fascism. Another thing I see present here is identification of enemies as a unifying cause. Y'all are using trans people to unite. Oh, we don't like trans people. Let's get behind them. Let's stop them from living their lives and enjoying their lives. That's a problem. And a third one of the early warning signs of fascism is rampant sexism, our obsession with gender, our obsession with splitting the sexes. There are people that are intersex. There are people that it's not black and white, as many others have said before. So I just want y'all to, if I can leave you with anything, I would say read On Tyranny by Timothy Snyder and learn the signs of fascism and take a hard look at what y'all are doing here. Thanks.
Any questions from the committee? Thank you. Aaron Baker. And Michelle, I believe I'm not going to attempt the last name, but it starts with, it's Sariev, I believe. Floor is yours.
Hi, I'm Aaron Baker. I am a trans woman and I am a local activist, and I am very grateful for the opportunity to speak up here. And I'm also grateful to have so many friends in this room. Thank you so much for showing up today. As I said before, I am a trans woman. I am an activist. I am not an athlete. In fact, I don't know any openly trans athletes at the high school or collegiate level. I've never met them, and that's because there are so few of us. A very small number of trans people are even interested in sports at all. It's just and when you think about like kind of the queer people in your life, you kind of know this intuitively already. Like we're not known for being good at sports. It's not our thing. And so I would like to bring some level of common sense to this debate, that the number of trans women who are interested in sports are so few. They are diamonds in the rough, and they are so special. They are not people who should be villainized. They are amazing people who are willing to fight against incredible odds and incredible opposition to do something that's so hard to do. It's so hard to face this kind of opposition. It's so hard to be at a hearing like this and hear the language. It's so hard to hear people describe me as a biological man, because because it's not true. I am hormonally female, I'm phenotypically female, I'm psychologically female, and that is a gross oversimplification of who I am and my identity. And it hurts. When the state of Utah tried to ban trans women from playing in sport, the governor was able to meet with every trans athlete in the state, all 4 of them. It's completely absurd to be legislating this at the state level, creating laws that impact so few people. It is clear that the state level is not the way that these things should be handled. So, thank you.
Thank you. Michelle is up next. And then I believe it's Tahir.
Hello, my name is Michelle Suriev. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a primary care provider with subspecialties in HIV care and prevention and gender affirming care. As a family nurse practitioner and a proud citizen of the state of Georgia, I am here to ask that the members of this committee not recommend a ban on transgender girls participating in sports. This is not just about sports. Not only do measures like this affect my trans patients who are terrified about losing their access to health care, but I also see parents of trans kids who report the negative effect that measures like this have on their children, whether or not they plan to participate in sports. I'm a primary care provider, and my goal for all of my patients is to optimize health and prevent chronic conditions. We know how much stress and anxiety can have an impact on overall health, and when we politicize the human rights of such a small percentage of people, it is not just hurting trans and non-binary folks, but is also negatively affecting cisgender Georgians. I'm a proud citizen of this state. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to talk here today, and I'm happy to take any questions.
I don't see any questions. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your testimony, your public comment. I'm sorry. Tahir, actually, I think it's the same last name. All right. And then Gabrielle, you're up next on deck.
So I guess I should say that I signed up not knowing that that was a sign up to speak, but now that I'm given the voice, I'm going to take the moment to actually use this moment. So I want to say, number one, I'm honored to be here today as a resident of Georgia and a voting citizen of our country. Last month, my wife and I went to Washington, D.C. And while she was at a health committee, I took the opportunity to walk around my nation's Capitol building. What I noticed was the heavy measures of security everywhere. I noticed a plaque at the foot of a checkpoint that I approached, and it was a plaque to Officer William F. Evans. The plaque read, on April 2nd, 2021, William Billy Evans died in line of duty protecting the United States Capitol during a violent attack. There was flowers there. And as I read that plaque, a guard approached me cautiously, and I made it clear to them that I was not there for trouble. I bowed my head and I was on their side. How did we come to this moment? Sorry, is what I thought to myself. I spent the rest of the day noticing the barbed wire, the large gates, the security everywhere. I also noticed the people who I was surrounded by, the Asians, the Latins, the Russians, and the Eastern European folks in large hordes who were there to honor the country they chose to move to. Much like my father, who served the army for 6 years to escape communism and persecution in his home of Bulgaria. As I approached this shiny golden building this morning, I quickly took notice that the same thing had happened here. We had sharp cast iron bars securely and yet oddly in place around our Capitol building. Police cars and barricades in places that I used to drive through to get to my home. I do wonder if we stop for a moment and ask ourselves, how did we get to this point? Many people I know struggle with simply understanding trans. I was taught by my wife, who just spoke, who protects and serves the trans community, that I should accept people for who they are and how they feel. And I've accepted that, and I accept people for who they are. I know that rules and regulations need to be in place for sure. I understand that, but this seems like such a strange thing to have to debate. Worrying about sports, worrying about the bathrooms, worrying about the swimsuits. This seems like we're making a big issue out of something that affects so few. Let's give these people their voice without fear. That's all I ask.
Thank you for your comments. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none. Gabrielle, you're up next, and then Noel will be on deck.
Good morning, and thank you for
Morning.
providing a space for this conversation to take place. My name is Gabrielle Claiborne. My pronouns are she, her. I am a transgender woman. I have medically transitioned now for over a decade. And just to give you some context on my credentials, I am a business owner. I'm an Atlanta native. I actually work with Fortune 100, 500 companies, global companies across the globe, helping them understand trans and non-binary people. I spend my life having these conversations around the expansiveness of gender. You know, I think it's not shocking that we are having this conversation today because, you know, while there are trans and non-binary and gender expansive people in the room, the lion's share of you are cisgender folks. So it's not surprising that the comments that are directed against trans and non-binary people from existing in our culture are coming from a cisgender lens, because oftentimes when I walk in a room, when all of us walk in the room, and we're often the only ones like us in the room, whether it's in a bathroom, whether it's in a locker room, we bring up something in other people. We bring up something in other people because they look at us and they judge us based on what? Our sex, and not who we know ourselves to be. You know, the reality is, all of you, everyone in this room has a gender identity. And for some of those who are cisgender, for folks whose gender identities align with the sex that they are assigned at birth, you've had the privilege of moving through this life not even having to think about your gender identity. Unfortunately, for trans people, that is not a privilege that we have. So I think the conversation that we're having today needs to be approached from the perspective of, what am I not thinking and feeling and understanding about your lived experience that I need to understand before I can make judgments about how you show up in this world? I'm also an athlete. I was an athlete in high school, a very accomplished athlete. And when I started medically transitioning 10 years ago, I actually played on a women's softball team here in Atlanta. And that organization welcomed me into this space. And guess what? Occasionally, I hit a ball over a fence. I wasn't the only person hitting the ball over the fence, though. There were other cisgender women hitting the ball over the fence. Guess what? I also struck out. The reality is, trans people exist and want to compete at the same level that cisgender people do in this culture, in our world, okay? What we have to understand is the rhetoric, the intention of trying to eradicate trans people from existence, like banning gender affirming care, banning trans people and gender expansive people from using restrooms that align with their gender identity. You're perpetuating the very things that we're trying to fight for, and that is just to be visible. So the reality is, and my ask is, if you all are having these conversations, have them from an informed and heartfelt perspective, okay? Understand our lived experiences. Don't approach it from your cisgender lens. I encourage folks to be a heart ally. What that means is, put yourself in the shoes of a person as the one who is being transgressed. What would you feel like if you were being attacked for who you know yourself to be? Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you. I don't see any questions from the committee. Thank you for your comments. Noel, you're up, and then Kim, you'll be on deck.
Hello, my name is Noelle Heatherland, and I'm here as a lifelong Georgian and a representative of the organization Georgia Equality. I graduated from the University of Georgia. We all agree the importance of sports being a safe place for women and girls. I would also like to remind this group here that when the previous public commenter, Lisa Blankenship, said that the school sided with the LGBTQIA+ community instead of women, that there are all kinds of women both in and outside of the LGBTQIA+ community. I respect women who don't have a body like mine, but I was assigned female on my birth certificate. And I'm also a part of the LGBTQIA plus community. So I'm amplifying that it's not women versus the LGBTQIA plus community. What I'm going to ask today as we begin to head into the 2025 legislative session is that we take a long pause and a lot of prayerful consideration with whatever you do next. Because we are talking about people's lives, children's lives. They, their families, and their doctors know that we are talking about young girls and young women, and a very small number, as Sasha, the attorney with Lambda Legal, highlighted, as well as other speakers today, as the athletic trainer who spoke last time highlighted. Y'all are focusing on a problem that just really doesn't exist, and it feels like people's humanity is being put on a chopping block in order to achieve political gain. When we talk about transgender people competing, I think we once again forget about the 7 feet tall cisgender women volleyball players, meaning they are taller than most cisgender women. They're not transgender, but they are probably taller than Lisa Blankenship's daughter. Girls and boys, men and women all have testosterone in their bodies, maybe close to none if they're a transgender woman taking medications to reduce testosterone and increase estrogen. Iman Khalif is not transgender, but she's an example of women being stronger than average. All women have varying degrees of testosterone. Michael Phelps has variations and differences that give him a huge advantage, and it has nothing to do with being transgender or not. I also would like to name that people are born intersex, and if you don't know what that is or don't know much about it, I would encourage you to look it up because it really throws a wrench into what you're doing here. Transgender people are not criminals. In fact, they're more likely to experience violence at the hands of others who have been conditioned to hate them through language and laws, starting from discussions at the White House and the Capitol. As I've said before, no one is transitioning for a competitive athletic edge. It's dangerous to be a transgender person in Georgia and in the United States and around the world, as it's more likely the transgender community will experience violence, as we remembered yesterday with Transgender Day of Remembrance. We are definitely against a categorical ban and believe individual autonomy should be respected. I also believe we need to lean into love and understanding, especially for those who are different than us. Nazi Germany reminds us of the importance of ensuring we are remembering our shared humanity, even of people we may judge or dislike. We are all God's children and deserve to be able to live safely and thrive. I am a Georgian comfortable sharing spaces and competing alongside transgender women. I also would like to highlight that we have a registered nurse, Elizabeth Downey, in the room that was not able to sign up on the sheet but would like a chance to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question for you, if that's okay. Any questions from the committee before I ask mine? What policy positions do you support as it relates to the inclusive competition I think that you're advocating for?
I first and foremost am going to state that I am not an attorney nor a medical provider, and I'm going to basically say what Sasha has already said earlier, that we unequivocally are against a categorical ban, and we believe that people should be looked at as individuals. If you want more than that, I think the doctor that was here at the hearing last time, Dr. Schneider, the other Dr. Michelle that was speaking earlier, I would say those are the kind of people, along with parents of transgender children as well as cisgender children, would be the best people to be having those conversations with.
Well, we can have those conversations. As you know, different doctors have different opinions and different.
The majority of doctors
different
agree with
lawyers.
what I've said.
How do you come to that conclusion?
Research and facts,
What percentage of doctors agree with what you said, and what specifically do
all major medical associations,
what is it that you just said that you say they agree with?
that transgender women and girls are transgender are women and girls, that they are their identities.
Okay. And so could you provide me with the surveys you have where,
Sure.
let me finish my question before you answer it, if you don't mind. Can you provide me the surveys where all doctors have been surveyed and
Say all,
what'd you say?
so the majority.
Okay. Can you provide me the surveys that show that a majority of doctors agree with what you just said?
I can send that to you, yes.
Thank you. There has to be rulemaking. You would agree with that, whether it's the NCAA, the IOC, the Georgia High School Association, legislative bodies, somebody has to do the rulemaking. Is that,
We already have that established, yes.
we already have, you're saying we already have rules established, or we've already established what?
We have rules established nationally, yes.
Well, we don't, because we're dealing with state law here as it relates to state high school athletics, or I think that we would agree that on the NCAA level, yes, there are nationwide rules that govern those that participate in the NCAA or NAIA. But as it relates to high school athletics, we don't have that nationally, correct?
I think what I'm going to say today is that I appreciate that we finally, out of all the hearings, had an expert that was able to speak today. That finally the first expert opposing your general consensus and statements was finally able to speak today, whereas all the other presenters during the presentations portion were supporting your thoughts and consensus until today. At the first hearing, we had no opposed people be able to speak. And so if you want us to be able to make presentations and speak at length, I would like to be given that opportunity as I previously requested. I don't want to continue to go on back and forth right now.
Thank you. All right, next up is Kim, is it Siders?
Siders.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Kim Siders. I am a parent of a transgender girl who was 13. I show up at these committee hearings over and over, so I recognize some of you. I was trying to understand why this is such a hot topic. My child started expressing what we called at the time like opposite gender expressions when they were 4. So at 4, the child we assumed was our son kept telling us, no, I'm a girl, wanting the, girls' clothes, girls' toys, to, only identifying with female characters and female friends. And we had no idea what was going on. We didn't know that transgender kids were a thing that existed in the world. We just had no point of view. I'm from South Georgia. My husband's from Iowa. We just had no exposure. It was not on TV. There were not political ads. Transgender kids were not a pillar of a major political party agenda. We didn't know anything. And from around age 4 to like age 8, everything intensified. And not only the expressions and the persistence of, no, I'm a girl, but I'm a girl on the inside, like those kind of things, the sadness. And we didn't know why. And we became very concerned when our child said, like, hey, like literally with a piece of handed me a note, there's no place for me in this world. Our child felt so alone and so other, without any bigger perspective that maybe they're not the only one. And that sent us down a path that started with our pediatrician and with a play therapist, and educating ourselves through reading books written by psychologists who've worked with transgender people for decades, right? We delayed even exposing that term to our kid. We didn't want to put a label on our child. We didn't want to plant a seed. What if we were wrong? But it hit, like I said, just we felt our child was in danger. They were so sad and alone. And once we said, hey, there are other people that feel this way, and this is, what that's called. It's called being transgender. Some people feel like the gender inside doesn't match the body outside. And our child was like a light bulb. That's me. And from that moment on, we tried to build a community, right? We tried to find other people so our child would not be so alone. And that's what we've done. And so our child transitioned going into the 3rd grade with she, her pronouns and clothes and etc. And so I know, I don't know, a dozen trans kids, maybe less really, because I've sought that community. And these are kids at different ages, some of them in college out of state now, some younger than my child. And I bet I know 10 more transgender kids than anybody sitting at that table. I know these parents. These kids are not dangerous. They are, the title of this bill implies that cisgender girls need to be protected from my child, my very unathletic, no hand-eye coordination theater kid, but who does want to join the intramural team because that's where her friends are. I'll tell you, I tried to figure out, why is this a big deal? So I started looking at other state bans on transgender athletes. And I think I've heard some of the other speakers allude to these. Like Utah had one transgender girl when they made that ban. And no allegations of having a competitive advantage. That's from the Wall Street Journal. So these are articles that I found when trying to figure out what other states look like. The same was true in South Dakota. One trans girl. Transgender people are 0.5% of the population. We're not worried about trans boys here. So of a fraction of a percent, we are talking about a fraction of that fraction, which are trans girls. I can tell you firsthand, amongst the folks that I know, the transgender folks that I know, none of them are competitive athletes. I mean, being transgender doesn't mean that you are bigger than your peers. It doesn't mean you're more athletic. It doesn't mean that you've had better training or experience playing sports. It doesn't necessarily give you any edge. So if we're talking about 0.25% of the population, I'm guessing, who are trans girls, of that 0.25%, how many even want to play sports? And then how many of those are even competitive versus the vast majority of high school students who play sports for fun, to be included, to belong, to be with their friends? Most of them are not, most of those, there's a tiny percentage of high school athletes that are actually very competitive. A lot of people ride the bench. And same for trans kids, like they're not all going to be super athletes. I'll tell you what these bills do, and I'm going to lump this bill in with the other bills that I, have shown up to talk to these committees about. This is a part of a large conversation that's happening. We've seen the presidential ads targeting transgender people in a really gross, harmful way. We hear politicians talking about kids going to school and getting, gender reassignment surgery, which is absurdly untrue. We hear all of these things in the national conversation, in the conservative radio host in the state that I have heard talk about these kids as if they are freaks and dangerous, and it makes their lives harder. It makes them more likely to be discriminated against, more likely to be bullied. It makes them less safe in the world, and they're already less safe than their peers because they are so different, and being different is hard. I'm going to share something very personal with you because this is what drives me to be here today, not because my kid's some great athlete and I'm worried that, she won't get, a spot on the junior varsity team. When she found out through friends, not last session, but the session before, that there were bills in, being in our legislature targeting trans kids. Like those were the hormone or the puberty blocker bills. I didn't tell her. I keep all of this from her because it is too much to ask a child to know that people are out here talking about them like this and legislating them and trying to take away access to things that we have said, hey, this is going to be something that you have access to that might help you. But she found out about it through our friends' kids. And I'll tell you what that did to her. That she internalized it. She was 11, all right? I mean, we are talking about children. Even at the high school level, these are 13, 14, 15, 16, 17-year-olds. I mean, these are children. To know this sent her spiraling into anxiety and depression. We didn't immediately know it. We found out, through the mental health survey that her school conducted. And I won't sugarcoat it, right? She had thoughts of not being alive. And when we asked her why, she's like, the laws. She's like, I know that there are people out there, and by out there, she means in here, that would be happier if I didn't exist. So bringing these bills up, making it a platform, making it a topic of conversation, in the public sphere, hurts these kids whether these bills pass or not. And I am begging you, this bill, other bills that are going to come before you in this next session, they surely will.
I'm going to ask you to wrap it up if that's okay.
Okay. I have one other statement, and this is why I think what's going on is that this is being driven not by, I know we had one parent with a kid who was afraid of a trans kid joining a team, but there's a quote in the New York Times from Terry Schilling, who's the president of American Principles Project. After gay marriage was resolved, we knew we needed an issue that candidates were comfortable talking about. And we threw everything at the wall. What stuck, somewhat unexpectedly, is the issue of transgender identity, particularly among young people. After careful planning by national conservative organizations to harness the emotion around gender politics, with gender norms shifting and a sharp rise in the number of people identifying as transgender, conservative groups spotted an opening in a debate that was getting attention. That's from the New York Times. That is a direct quote. So this is a problem that doesn't exist here. You're hurting these transgender kids, and I think it's politically motivated, not just in this body. I'm saying this is coming from bigger conservative institutions who are looking to rally votes and raise money. So please give these kids a break.
Can I ask you one quick question?
Yeah.
You characterized a lady that spoke earlier, that her daughter, who I have never met before, either of them, as I believe your words were, afraid to have a trans person on their team. The testimony that I heard today was relative to times that were superior. And while you're asking other people to consider your perspective, can you consider the perspective of a collegiate athlete? We had 5 of them here today, one of which, I didn't know this, but if you finish in the top 16 in your sport and these, at least in swimming, you're an All-American. And we heard testimony from a swimmer who finished 17th and was not an All-American. And she was not an All-American because somebody in the top 16 2 years prior, I believe, had swam in sport as on the men's University of Pennsylvania swimming team. Can you understand, or at least accept, that some people may be approaching this from an angle more than just, well, they're afraid, which is, I did not hear, I'm not going to prescribe intent to anybody in this room. But can you understand that there can be a different reason why we're having this conversation than just fear?
Yes, and I apologize. I walked in after the conversation had started, and so I heard a comment made about that testimony. I didn't hear it, so I apologize to the person who was giving that testimony. And yeah, I'm very willing to do that. The categorical ban of these kids and the large conversation and the media attention, and that's what I'm asking you to stop. Right? Is there a nuance? There's also, I have an article too about the research on this. It's such a tiny population of kids. It's not well studied. When kids are on puberty blockers, when kids are on HRT, there's not a body of evidence about how that affects their sports performance because there are just too few of them. So I'm asking you to reconsider a categorical ban, and also to just try to stop these conversations, this like huge hoopla around these kids.
Thank you. Appreciate you being here today. All right, we have 12 more minutes in this room before we before we need to adjourn. I know members have other places they need to be. So I want to first of all thank everyone who is here today, those of you that signed up to testify. I see somebody's raising their hand. If you were not able to testify, it's because I don't have your name on the sheet. I did allow the last speaker to sign up late, but we do have some time constraints. So would like to spend the last 12 minutes, if we can, with an open discussion amongst the committee. And what we will do at our final meeting is bring forth a series of recommendations. So I'm going to take notes based on y'all's conversation and bring some recommendations back to the committee. I think it's worthwhile to remind everyone of where we stand today in the state of Georgia. A few years ago, I believe it was 3 years ago, the General Assembly passed a bill essentially prescribing the control to make decisions around transgender participation in sports to the Georgia High School Association. And they passed a resolution or motion that stated that participation in sports, high school sports in the state of Georgia would be based on the gender prescribed or the sex prescribed on a birth certificate. The law is currently silent on the collegiate competition level. So right now, we just have a law as it relates to high school associations. The NCAA in 2010 had a policy that athletes had to undergo 1 year of testosterone therapy, and then in 2022 that law changed, or rule, it's not a law, the rule changed to essentially defer to these governing bodies of the specific sports. So that's the current state of play as it relates to collegiate athletics. And with that, I'm happy to open it up to the committee to make any comments you'd wish, highlight anything that you've heard across these three hearings that we've had, and or make a statement about a specific recommendation that you would like to see part of a motion that we bring forth out of the committee at our next meeting. Senator Rahman, number 9.
Well, I really don't think we have a really major issue in Georgia. I haven't had 6 years, I've been with this body, but definitely, there's some issues going on, that you just mentioned, and we have pressing issues in kitchen table issues that we're dealing with. We have Medicaid expansion that so many people that we don't have. So we have other issues to deal with it, and I don't think in my district I haven't really heard anything specifically that have, that pressing me to really recommend anything, but I'm open to listen to my other colleagues, if you may have in your districts or in the state of Georgia, and I'm willing to listen and see what kind of recommendation that you will come up with, I'd be glad to work with you. But specifically, like I said, I don't have any major issues. And in my, as an immigrant, I came to this country as a minority, 40 some years in this country. I met some good folks from, doesn't matter if it's, transgender or LGBTQ. And I personally never had any problem with any of them. You talk about, for any major walks of life. So I never had that experience. So it'd be difficult for me to judge some minority folks as like, there are very few people that I've seen, or I met. So it's a really difficult situation for me to justify and make a comment and think that I haven't experienced, That's the issue I'm dealing with, personally.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Dixon, let me turn you on.
Chairman, thank you for chairing this committee. I do appreciate hearing from both sides on this issue. I know from the trans community, I know it's not easy to get up and testify on any issue. Same thing with the collegiate athletes, that we heard from, the female athletes. It's not easy to come in front of Senate Study Committee and testify. And I'm grateful for everyone that participated in that. Gave me a broader perspective over this issue. But, I come back to it very simply, I guess selfishly as a father of 2 young daughters, We've got to protect women. We've got to protect their sports. We've got to protect them in changing rooms, from what we heard from many of those athletes that testified, or 4 or 5 of them that testified in the first committee hearing, having to change, which took, 20, 30 minutes at a time in front of a transgender female, but that still had the genitalia of a male. Was horrific for them to witness that. Some of them ended up changing in a storage closet. Some of them waited till that athlete left the room, having them miss some of their competition. Now that's just at the college level. We're not even talking about minors that are in K through 12. I think we've got to protect that. We've got to protect, women's sports. They fought for generations to be equal. Now, please do not interrupt me, sir.
The room will come to order. The room will come to order. Sir, you and whoever shouted out had the opportunity to testify, and I think all of the members of the committee would make themselves available to answer your questions after this if you would like to do that. But this is not the time to. We're going to be in recess for 5 minutes. Respect the senators as they speak in the same way that each senator respected each one of you. For those of you that chose not to speak, this is not the appropriate time to shout out comments from the audience, and would welcome you. I think every member of this committee on both sides of the aisle will be more than happy to have a one-on-one conversation, and that is the way that proper public discourse and helpful public discourse takes place. So, Chairman Dixon, I want to allow you to continue your remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll just go ahead and wrap it up. I don't think it's any mystery where I stand on this issue. I did carry legislation last year to protect women's sports, to ban biological males playing in girls' sports, and I still stand there today, and I think it's something that we need to move forward with in 2025.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Chairman Dozal, for having these meetings, and those senators and the public who's been engaged and involved with this issue. I think my position's been, fairly clear. I do have concerns, and I've expressed it at the first meeting, and I've expressed it in other settings. Especially in the K-12 environment, when we talk about Title IX and we talk about separate but equal facilities. I know we have school districts and school buildings across the state which are not up to that standard. I think that needs to be addressed. I know mostly that's a federal issue. But when we have school districts not, acting with expediency or concerns where minors feel uncomfortable, that they don't have a space for themselves to, change, participate, kind of celebrate, what young women, young ladies are doing in sports, and they feel like they have to have, special rules for them to participate, or, there has to be kind of intermediate rules or regs that are really not official. Honestly, they're not appropriate to basically check a box. I know I have an issue with that. I know many leaders have an issue with that. Parents have issues with that. And that needs to be addressed. I'm a little surprised we've not heard that from some of the school organizations. As whether it's this discussion or other discussions have come up in terms of, where we're spending our tax dollars, capital funding, or other things. As we go along. So I just ask that, as we look at the recommendations of what we put into this report, some semblance of that is included, and it's weighed with, being mindful that, girls have an opportunity to compete just like the young men in all our schools across the state, to make sure it's equal and fair, as I think Title IX was intended for it to be. Without cutting corners or other loose interpretations in terms of how it's implemented at the local level with state dollars or with local dollars generated from local shared property taxes in our counties or even city schools, depending on their situation. So, I think this topic is, I don't want to say it is what it is, but as some of the speakers, did say, this was, discussed in the presidential campaigns on both sides. I think to label one side weaponizing or saying there's a weaponization, I think is, categorically, kind of not true, because I think we've seen it on both sides of the aisle, unfortunately. To the one speaker that did get up and talk about, I do agree with, the kind of fortress-like environment we have at the state capitol with the fence and the gate. This building needs to be safe. We need public safety. We got knuckleheads that want to come here and create property damage. That's unacceptable. But, I do agree with, this gate outside. We don't need this gate. I think it sends the wrong message and symbol to the public that, this is where we have debate. And we can get up, people can get up and we can go back and forth all day long. I have my beliefs, you have your beliefs. And that's why we live in America. So That's my position, Mr. Chairman. I'm sure there'll be other topics and maybe other discussions we lead up to the finalization of the report or any consideration of legislation. I do want to thank Chairman Dixon for carrying a bill last year. I know it passed the Senate, got stalled in the House, and hopefully Chairman Dixon will take that up again. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Avatarte. Any other comments or questions or dialogue with the committee? Senator. Senator.
And I know election is over, and we got to take care of the people of Georgia. We got a lot of pressing issues. I'm going to come back. Let's keep the federal government out of it, and let's do whatever is good for the state of Georgia. What do we need to take care of every single citizen? Doesn't matter you're majority or minority. That's what we need to look at it. And definitely, I'll be glad to work with you all. What are the recommendation we have? The members who are present here and some of us not here, so I'm sure other folks have some recommendation too. So I'll be glad to work with you all and see whatever we can do to move forward in helping Georgia and each and every make sure we have the rights for every individual. Doesn't matter what party you belongs to, and let's do what's right for Georgians. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. I'm going to spend the next week or so reviewing testimony and comments, both from people here today and those that testified and commented previously. I want to thank everyone for taking part in this process. Some of you commented this was your first time participating in petitioning your government. I want to thank you for doing that. Some of you signed up and didn't know what you're signed up for, and were able to do so anyway. I want to thank you guys for participating in that. If any of you wish to reach out to me and wish to have a conversation, Orla is behind me to my left, and we'd be happy to do that as well. Committee members, I would look for a meeting announcement within the next probably week and a half or 2 weeks, and we'll try to keep that far enough away from our holiday schedules that it does not impede any of your travel schedules. With that, this committee is adjourned. Thank you.